Are you the only one in the house?
No. Phil and Barbara upstairs asleep. Why?
All right. Now, I want you to do exactly what I tell you without asking any questions, okay? Now, just put the phone back on the hook, walk to the front door, and leave the house.
What's wrong?
Please, Miss Bradford, please just do as I tell you.
Okay. I'll get Phil and Barbara.
No, don't do that, Jess. Jess, the caller is in the house. The calls are coming from the house. Jess! Jess, get up! And don't...
This is Tim. This is Jonathan. And welcome to the final night of 13 Nights of Halloween. So, fright seekers, Halloween lovers, and movie fans in general, it is the grand finale of our chilling journey through 13 nights of horror movies. It's also our season finale. As the moon hangs high and the shadows grow long, we arrive at our 13th and final installment, where the classics clash against their remakes in a battle for terror supremacy. Tonight, we summon the eerie echoes of a bygone era as we delve into the sinister depths of the 1974 masterpiece, Black Christmas, by Maestro Bob Clark. Joining us for one last time on this spine-tingling odyssey is none other than horror author Ivy Tholen.
Hello. Glad
and
to be here.
Chris from @BlackChristmas on Instagram. We prepare to unravel the mysteries and horrors lurking within the timeless original that laid the groundwork for generations of terror to come. So gather close, dear viewers, as we brace ourselves for a night of unbridled fear and unrelenting suspense. For in this hallowed halls of this quaint sorority house, whispers of dread and shadow of the past converge to weave a tapestry of nightmares that will haunt your dreams long after credits roll. Welcome to episode 13 of 13 Nights of Halloween, where darkness reigns supreme and fear has but one name: Black Christmas. Okay. So, I'll break down the plot for us and then let's dive into this. The plot summary. As the holiday season descends upon Bedford, the sorority sisters of Pi Kappa Sigma House prepare for the festive break. However, their merriment is shattered when they begin receiving disturbing and obscene phone calls from an unknown assailant. Despite their initial dismissals, the calls soon take a darker turn, signaling the presence of a sinister force lurking in their midst. As tensions rise and the mysterious caller's threats escalate, the sisters find themselves ensnared in a web of paranoia and fear. When one of their own goes missing, panic grips the house, and the realization dawns that they may be facing a predator far more malevolent than they could have ever imagined. With the help of Lieutenant Ken Fuller, the determined police officer assigned to this case, Jess Bradford takes charge in unraveling the chilling mystery before it's too late. As the snow blankets the town and the body count rises, Jess must confront the terrifying truth lurking behind the walls of the sorority house before darkness claims them all. Who wants to go first for this film?
Ooh, can I?
I feel, based on our scores, I feel like that's a good idea.
Okay, so, man, I like this one way better than the other two.
Okay, that's
Holy
good to
cow.
hear.
This is definitely way better. I like this a lot more. So, with story and the plot, man, like considering the time that it came out, 1974, you didn't get a lot of stuff like this. You know, this was pretty unique for the time. The same concept, you know, that you have with all the other ones. You know, you've got your sorority house, sisters. It's Christmas time. You got your sorority mom. Everybody's doing their thing. They're partying it up, and there's this series of creepy calls going on. You know, freaking everybody out. You know, weird voices, multiple voices, even just being really, really obnoxious and crude. And it's out there, and you know, it makes them kind of scared. Dude, there's some really crude stuff here. But you know, the people, the cast and everything, and who they got to play the characters and how they ran it out, man, it's a trip of a story. Going from the creepy calls, and then with Claire going missing, you know, her trying to pack and leave, and then like her dad showing up to pick her up and not being there, and then like the search beginning. You know, how everything set off from there, and how things just got escalated and got, you know, more tense and scary throughout everything. And with the lack of technology that we have now versus what you see there and how old school everything is, the way they ran it down was pretty cool. You know, Jess being the main character, kind of the focus of the thing with what she had going on, you know, and her boyfriend, Peter, who seems like pretty stressed with this whole trying to be a pianist, recital guy, whatever it is he's doing with the observatory or conservatory. I don't remember.
Yeah.
Is that what it was? Yeah. You got their tension, like everything's twisted with them and their relationship and not wanting to be together, and the whole idea of her being pregnant, and then just, you know, then like trying to find and like more, or there's like another girl goes missing, and then you've got, you know, the detectives and like stupid guy, you know, Sergeant Nash, you know, who doesn't have a clue, but then you've got John Saxon playing Lieutenant Fuller, who's pretty on track with it, who's deep into his investigation and really feeling things out. I don't know. I like the story overall a lot better than how they laid it out with the other ones. I gave it a 4 just because there was so much more focus on what was going on directly with the creepy callers and, you know, someone like creeping them out and then the murder and trying to find Claire. I don't know. I'm not explaining it well, but I just really like this version a whole lot more than the 2006 and 2019 version.
That's good to hear, Jonathan. I was nervous since you were the only one who never seen this. I was worried what the reaction to this movie would be. So I'm glad to hear you like this more than the other two.
There's so many different things I want to talk about it, but I'm trying to like save it for the other categories. So it's like, well, I'm kind of falling off here.
Yeah.
Because there's just so much. There's so much.
This movie, since we've already done the 2 remakes that came after this, all 3 movies are open game to discuss. And we talked about how the 2019 version was about the message. And to me, this is how you make a movie with a message, because this movie exists amazingly without the message. But then you understand the message, and it's like unlocking a whole other level to how brilliant this film is. So, and I'm watching this, and this movie is about men controlling women's bodies. That's what this movie is. And we have it specifically Jess and her boyfriend, him telling her she has to keep the baby even though she doesn't want it. So that's him controlling her. We have the killer taunting the women in extremely graphic detail about what he wants to do to their bodies, and possibly what he did to a girl named Agnes, who we know very little about in this film, and I prefer that. We have the father, who is shocked at his daughter's behavior and frequently says this isn't how he raised her. This isn't what he would have chosen for her life. And it just throughout, there's so many different versions of some kind of control. And there's also so many different versions of women reacting to it in this movie. And the ultimate, you know, Jess's story is kind of the focus. But ultimately, I view this movie as like the killer. We have that red herring with the boyfriend, but that's a parallel for the deeper story that's being told here about control. And the killer is the extreme manifestation of that control over their body. He is ending their lives. It's not voluntary. Okay. So that is, to me, that's the deeper story. As a slasher, it works, well, pseudo slasher, it works fantastically. And then there's also just this deeper layer there to that storytelling. Like, one of the things I love about this film and the story is that it subverts the slasher tropes, because who is the first person to go? Probably the most innocent person in the house. And I love that about this. So for me, I give the story a 5. I think this story is brilliant. It set the foundation for so many stories to come after it, but it did it better than all of them.
Yeah, you said it way better than I did. I was not succinct at all. Yeah.
It's okay.
I think Ivy should go next because I don't really know how to follow that.
Yeah.
I don't either. That was all said just perfectly.
Oh, thank you.
We talked about 2019 being tell, don't show the movie. This is the exact inverse. This thing doesn't preach at you. It doesn't tell you what you need to be thinking. It just shows you a situation and says, why don't you think about this? And that's a much better way to get something across to people than yelling at them and wagging a finger and having people just parrot things that the writer believes. This movie, in my opinion, is the first modern slasher, like, period. There's other stuff. People can debate Psycho. People can debate Peeping Tom. And then obviously...
You brought up my favorite movie of all time.
Peeping Tom?
No, Psycho.
Okay, I'm going to say, I've never heard of this movie. What?
Psycho. There is... But I totally agree with what you're saying. The body count in Psycho is like, it's not a body count. It kind of germinated the idea, and then this is that first one to have a significant body count and kind of no motivation for specific people. Yeah, I get what you're saying. I agree completely, actually.
And we have the killer's point of view stalking all of these girls. That used to be a much bigger deal in the earlier slashers. Friday the 13th does it too, where you're seeing from Billy's point of view or Jason's point of view. And when it's done well, it's really scary. And it's done so well in this movie. Billy is absolutely terrifying. If I was on the end of those phone calls, I would be crying. Like, if that was what those were coming to me, I would be crying, and I'd be hanging up the phone immediately. I would not sit and listen. But just all of it is just fantastic, and it created the formula. I mean, it also owes a lot to Italian giallo films, like a lot.
Even the color of the blood.
Yeah, that was exactly what I was saying. Yes, last night when I was watching it, I was like, that's red paint. It's great.
Yeah, it's pretty bright. And I was like, ugh.
Yeah. Well, that's how Italian giallo films are. The blood looks like red paint in all of them. It's fabulous. But this is the American one. This is the one. This is the one that created it. I love it.
Yeah, I don't really know if I have anything else to say. I gave it a 4 for, all the reasons that you guys all said. I mean, I honestly, I understood to some degree kind of the layers to the plot here, but I had never really thought of the narrative as much as you had. I mean, I don't know. You unveiled a lot of things to me, Tim. So as many times as I've seen this movie, it's always been just, one of my favorite slashers. And I had never really thought about, I guess, the parallel between what Billy is doing to the girls and what Peter is doing to Jess, which makes sense. I mean, I had never really thought about it much. Yeah. But yeah, I gave it a 4. I think it's fun. I don't know. I don't know what category this falls into exactly on here, but kind of my only sort of gripe, and I think I lumped it into story, which is why I didn't give it a 5. But I think there's like a slight pacing problem. At least maybe it's just because I've seen this movie so much that kind of around like minute 20 to like minute 40 or something, I know is very specific, but it's kind of after that 15-minute opening sequence and until Saxon gets involved that I think there is a little pacing issue, and so I kind of lumped that in a story, which is why I gave it a 4. But I don't know.
I love that segment because that is Mrs. Mack's segment.
Yeah.
I love Mrs. Mack so much. That is her portion because she, like, outside of her, this movie has very little humor. I guess
Barbara's hilarious. Yeah.
Barbara's hilarious. But
Barb's kind of a bitch, though, dude.
I love her. I love
Getting
her
that
so
little
much.
kid drunk? I mean, come on, man.
Getting the kid drunk is so funny.
She's like giving him sips of it. She's like, what are you doing to that child, woman?
Isn't she doing it in front of Claire's dad?
Yeah, in front of Mr. Harrison. Yes. Like, what the hell?
It's so funny. Margot Kidder is fantastic in this film. I love. We'll get to her for acting, but
yeah.
I love seeing the future Lois Lane get a kid drunk at a Christmas party in college.
The hell.
All right, so
I would just say you are not wrong about the pacing, though. There are a couple scenes that really drag a little bit longer than they need to. I think Peter's, when he's playing for his whoever he's playing for,
that was rough.
Understandably, it needs to go on for a while because we need to see him fall apart. But it went on for a little bit too long, and so did those carolers. It's like there's a couple of places where they really drag it out probably longer than they need to.
I'm going to talk about the carolers later.
Yeah. I'll talk about some of that in the editing.
Oh, yep. Okay, we got to keep going because I got a lot to say about this movie.
Okay.
Man.
So on the character then.
The character arc of this film. I gave it a 4. I'm just going to start with my score. I gave it a 4 because there's kind of a lack of resolution at the end, but it goes back to what I said about the Jess's boyfriend kind of wanting to control her and her future. And I think the arc is perfectly captured when she tells Peter at the conservatory, says she's pregnant and she wants to have an abortion. And he snaps off and says, "Don't you ever consider anybody but yourself." And then later, when he comes to the house and they're sitting down and he is trying again to persuade her, and she says, all of those dreams that we talked about when we started dating, all of those things I want to do with my life, I still want to do them. And you are in the way, is basically what she says. And she ends it. He wants to get married and she's like, no, I have my dreams to pursue. And I think that's an incredible arc of her being strong-willed and finding herself in the center of all of this that's going on. She breaks free from Peter. And that's the moment, honestly, early in the film, probably about halfway through, I'm back and forth on if Barb is the final girl or Jess is. Mm-hmm. And if it wasn't for Peter's storyline, I would have no indication that Jess was going to be. But because of the Peter story, it becomes clear. But it's that breaking of her relationship and that freedom and independence that she pursues on her own that is a great character arc. And I think that is the message of the film, ultimately. And what I love about that is, like Ivy said about the 2019, it is very open to interpretation because it's not shoving any of that in your face. You're probably not going to catch it 1 time, 2 times, 3 times. If you're looking for it, you might. But I think that's the beauty of good art, is that it's open to that interpretation and you can discover that message or that meaning on your own. Someone might get meaning from Barb's story, but I gave that story a 4 because the ultimate, I guess she did break free. She ultimately killed Peter. But I gave it a 4 because she's like asleep on a bed at the end of the movie and we don't really see that resolution of her being free. We see that she gets it, but I gave it a 4.
Okay, well, I'll just go ahead and get my shittiness out of the way.
Yeah, I'm curious.
When I think of character arc, I'm going to see growth and development. more so than what we saw. So I'll just say I had a 2 on it. Sue me, whatever. I was like, I would have liked to have seen, like I said, without the resolution, that really kills it for me, and not really seeing what happens with Jess. Like I said, it's just a super downer for me. I was kind of pissed about that, that I didn't see. There's no action to that past her laying in the bed and the end of the film. I'm just like, well, what the hell, man? What the hell?
Yeah.
I feel a little cheated on that. So, 2. Yeah.
Yeah, but could you not maybe infer that she isn't, like, there is no resolve to her because Billy wins in the end, and so, like, they're tethered so much that we see that Peter, she murders Peter or whatever, but since Billy wins, that she probably loses ultimately.
That ending is a masterpiece for different reasons that I was going to touch on in the direction.
Definitely.
I love that ending, but I do agree. It's not a true ending. It leaves the story very open-ended. I mean, that's why I docked 1 point. Jonathan was more dissatisfied by it.
I could see myself maybe going to a 3 with it instead. I mean, yes, got some good points, so maybe a 3 would be more appropriate. But I was just kind of like, what the hell?
Yeah. No, I get what you're saying. I
think what I have to say kind of almost goes into the acting, because
okay.
I have it going in the background right now, and it was just actually the scene where she's telling him that she's pregnant. So we'll come back to that part in the acting part. But
okay.
I always see the end of Jess's story as when that final image of him bloody in her lap. Like, that's where Jess's arc ends. And then the rest of it is sort of like a little epilogue that just happens to be Jess ends up dead after all, and it never mattered at all. But I consider her having gone full circle in that is it the basement, right?
Yeah.
In the basement, him bloody, like, that's her ending. And then the rest of it is just kind of for a fun scare, and it's an excellent scare, but
it's so good.
Yeah. I feel like Jess gets, like, from where because she starts out very, like, if you're watching that scene, she starts out very meek. She cannot look him in the eye. And it doesn't seem like it seems like this is a relationship that has been falling apart for a while, and he has a tendency to get a little intense, maybe violent. Like, she's expecting him to flip out. And she's not looking at him and her body language. And by the end, has no problem looking him in the eye and being like, no, this is not how this is going to go. And then we have her killing him in the end. It's there. It's not tied up in a bow. But for me, bloody Peter across her lap, whether he deserved to be dead or not, which he probably didn't, but,
that's an interesting perspective on that being the end of her story. And the rest being an epilogue. I never really watched it like that, but that makes perfect sense. Like, if it were a book, it would end with the police discovering her in the basement, and then there would be that just couple pages after. So that's a very good point.
So I don't know. I gave character a 5, but I think when I watch these movies, I think about character a little different. I mean, I know you kind of think more about the arc, and I just think more about kind of the depth of each character and then how, like, dynamic they can be. And I think a lot of the sorority girls have, like, a rich personality, and I don't know. I think there is just a lot of depth to a lot of them. Like Barbara, I mean, I don't know. She's just the drunk, but she's kind of clever and witty, and you can tell she's got an interesting relationship with her mother. And I don't know. So I think each of these characters are distinct in who they are. And I think for a slasher, we don't really ever see that. I mean, there's like 3 or 4 tropes that, especially women, are going to be in a slasher. And here there's so much more, which I appreciate. And I remember all their names, and this might be because I've seen the movie so many times, but I just feel like they're people and not just, I don't know.
No, that's a very good point. And what you said exactly about remembering their names is exactly what I was thinking. Like, I can't remember any of the characters, even the main character from 2019.
Nope.
Yeah.
Couldn't tell you what her name was. But I know Jess, and I know Barb, and I know Phil.
Mm-hmm.
I know those. I know Claire's the first to go missing. Peter sometimes can remember his name, so on. But I remember these girls, and I remember Mrs. Mack. They all have distinct personalities. That's a very good point. Before we jump into the next category, I want to tell you a little bit about Zencastr. When I was preparing for our 13 Nights of Halloween series, I was really searching for a way to streamline the process. I wanted a professional looking setup to invite our guests to. I wanted quality audio and video recording, and I wanted the easiest way to release the episodes to as broad of an audience as possible. This is how I landed on Zencastr. It is now super easy to record a podcast with Zencastr. Just log in using your browser and start recording a high quality podcast right away. Record studio quality sound and up to 4K video with your guests. Feel a sense of zen knowing Zencastr's multi-layered backups ensure you always have your recordings in the highest quality, even if the connection is unstable. And speaking of audio quality, have you ever worried what you sound like? Zencastr's post-production process makes you sound buttery smooth. It automatically removes those ums and ahs in your recording. It removes those awkward pauses in conversation too. Set the podcast loudness and levels while reducing background noise with the click of a button. So if you are thinking of starting your own podcast or just want to streamline what you are already doing, go to zencastr.com/pricing and use my code AVERAGECUSTOMER, and you'll get 30% off your first month of any Zencastr paid plan. That's average customer, one word. I want you to have the same easy experiences I do for all of my podcasting and content needs. It's time to share your story. So let's dive into the next category. So on to music and sound design. This is a tough one because I think this has far less to do with the music and more to do with the sound design. And this movie is a perfect example of why I lump those two into a single category, this and Paranormal Activity. Because there's almost no music in this movie. Almost none. And it's amazing. And it is one of those things that I watched this with my sister and my wife, and I was worried my sister would find it boring because there's no music to like tell you something is about to happen or to hook you and pull you in. There's maybe like music in 10% of this film, and that's not counting the carolers and the opening Christmas hymn that's at the very beginning. And I love it because it adds to that voyeuristic feel of the movie. But that is the part that I come in, and this gets all the praise for sound design, because when we are in first person shots, we hear Billy breathing, and it's so uncomfortable and it is so good. And hear him breathing to himself or talking to himself or singing to himself, and it's chilling. And the scene where he throws a temper tantrum in the attic and is just like shrieking. I could close my eyes and have goosebumps from the sound design on that, or the sound design on the phone calls where there's multiple voices coming through.
He's expanded his act. Could that be one person? No, Claire, that's the Mormon Tabernacle Choir doing their annual obscene phone call.
I get goosebumps every time. And we mentioned they're vulgar and disgusting, and I'm amazed, quite honestly, that the 2006 R-rated one, as extreme as it was, didn't manage to have a single phone call that affected me quite as much as any of the ones from this movie. 74 gave me far more goosebumps and like, I can't believe they said that in a movie than 2006 did. So it's, the phone calls are fantastic. The sound design on all of it, I think it's silent. I mean, it's clearly silent on purpose, and it makes me kind of feel like I'm there. And I think that's what I like about it. I don't have music telling me there's a jump scare coming, or I don't have music. This movie doesn't even really have music for jump scares. It has sound, and it's so good. I love it. I don't know why I gave it a 4. I gave it a 4 on music and sound design because there is that kind of music-ish stuff that's more like just sound. And I don't know that it doesn't faze me either here or there, but it's great throughout the movie.
So yeah, the sound design is definitely what shines through in this film. I think when I was looking at the credits last night, there was only like 2 actual Christmas songs in the whole film, but there's a lot of open natural sound. You know, you hear house sounds. You don't hear a lot of stuff when there's quiet and there's no one around. You hear sounds that you would hear in a big old house, kind of. You know, but the way they use sound in other ways also, like the scene where they're out doing the search for Claire and they find the body of that dead girl. And Mr. Harrison standing there, and the girl's mother comes up. When she screams, you don't hear the scream, though. You hear the transition with the phone ringing to the next scene. I was like, that's awesome. I love that. That was so good. It was such a good part there. And then just, you know, a lot of what you hear soundtrack-wise as far as the score, you know, you don't get much music, which I wish there had been a little more music involved, but it's okay for what it was. That piano scene, dude, with Peter at the conservatory was rough, and like I was saying, that was too long of a scene. They should have cut that down a little bit more, for sure. But like the tension that you had with the piano and with his situation, it kind of lent to what you feel throughout the rest of the score. Because even though there's not a lot of music, in a lot of those parts where it gets kind of tense, you've got a lot of like those muted piano kind of string pulling going on, or like harp, whatever it is. It's kind of a muted tone, but it sounds like a piano, and it just kind of fits that theme for sound with Peter and his thing that I thought was really, really good. But like I said, still kind of empty some parts, but the way they use sound in some of those parts, and like with the attic where you're talking about Billy freaking out and everything, that was pretty tense. So overall, because of so much lack of the more music with it, I kind of gave it a 3. Although I feel like maybe I should have gone with a 4, though. Like,
I hear a 4. I'll go adjust. I'll give it a 4. Yeah. Let's give it a 4.
Let's change it 4. Yeah. Let's change 4.
Well, Jonathan, I'm sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off, but you brought up what I was going to say is the strings that we hear for like Billy's theme. Those are someone running their fingers along the back of a piano.
Yeah,
like that's what the sound is. And then so you have, from one angle, Peter's playing the front of the piano, and Billy's theme is kind of the back of the piano, and so it kind of harkens to that parallel we see the whole time.
They're two sides of the same coin. Two sides of the same coin.
I like it.
I think they also.
I didn't even think of that.
I think they also use the same kind of piano sound in Weezer's Sweater Song, which is cool too. So I like to think that this movie maybe inspired the Blue Album to some degree, and. But we'll talk about that and its influence. But yeah, I mean, the sounds are really punchy. I mean, one scene in particular that I thought was just like awesome and terrifying is when Billy's chasing Jess and she like goes into the basement, is trying to lock the door, and Billy's like screaming and like bashing on the door. The sound is amazing there. But yeah, I gave it a 5, I think.
I gave it a 5 because the sound design is so fantastic. That scene in particular with Jess on one side of the door and Billy on the other side of the door is terrifying. And it's the banging and the noises he's making, and it's just everything. It just works so perfectly. Everything is almost silent most of the time, and then bam! As soon as something scary is going to happen, everything gets really loud, and it's done in a really good way and not a bad way like some movies do it. Some movies just throw sounds at you just to do it. This one has purpose, and all of them it just sounds kind of wrong in some way. Like the piano, like making the string noise, doing it that way with the piano, that just doesn't sound right. So it helps, it's kind of off, and it helps put you in that sort of off kilter, sort of creeped out mood. And I just love it.
One thing that I do like about the 2006 one, maybe better, is all of like the Christmas themed music and sounds and stuff.
Yes.
I did miss some of that. I know we have the carol scene, which the caroling scene, which I love in this movie, and I think it starts with Silent Night, or Silent Night's somewhere in here. But yeah, I do. I don't know. You're right. I don't know. But the 2006 one did a really good job with making it sound like Christmas as well as like bloody massacre.
Yes, I agree with that. I do think this one used the Christmas backdrop in its sets very well. So while we didn't have the music like the 2006, I agree. I love the atmosphere on the 2006 for fun. This one, I noticed there are like shots where we are looking through the wreath at Jess or something. So the Christmas is pervasive, unlike the 2019 where I felt like we didn't really get much of the Christmas focus at all. Yeah, I didn't know that about the piano being the strings in the back, but now that you say that makes perfect sense. And that parallel just added a new level of like, I want to change my score to a 5. We have Peter on one side, Billy on the other, but that brings me Billy. We glossed over Billy in character. We need to talk about Billy because 2006 gave us Billy's backstory. I mentioned that 2006 was Billy's movie. This movie tells us nothing about Billy. And I love it. I think he's far more terrifying knowing nothing about him. Those phone calls, it's clear there's some kind of psychotic break at some point. And Agnes, who is that to Billy? Don't the voices say his sister at one point?
Well, you got 3 different voices that are in there. Bob Clark, the director himself, was actually one of the phone voices, as well as one of the Prowler shadows in the film. Him, Nick Mancuso, and Anne Sweeney, we're all uncredited for this, unfortunately, but they were the blend of those different voices, that were creeping everybody out through those calls. And like when they start asking about Agnes, where did you put Agnes, Billy? And it's like, what the hell are you talking about? Which, really makes you think like when they made the 2006 version, they were really, really trying to fill some story and give some detail, almost like their version was a sequel and not just a remake necessarily to the original.
It's interesting that you mentioned that because as I was watching the 2006, it had a lot of the requel vibes of, hey, Billy is returning to this house. It's just in 2006, it was previously his house, not the sorority that he murdered a bunch of people at 50 years before. Yeah. Or I guess in 2006, it would have been 30.
This is actually the 50th year anniversary. This is it? Yeah, I think December of this year, it'll be 50 years.
Nice.
Wow. But yeah, I think Billy is a far more interesting character in this film because we know nothing about him.
Mystery.
I love that. I love not having all the answers. It leaves more to the imagination. And 2006 gave us a little bit too much. Still love the film. So yeah, still a very entertaining film. But like we said, 2006 kind of set Billy up to be the next Jason or whatever, and then we didn't get those movies. This one, it kind of set up for a sequel that never happened, but on I'm glad it didn't, to be honest. But I think he's just far more terrifying being the enigma that he is. And I did have a question, because I've seen this movie a dozen times, and I don't know if I just missed the line and happened to, like, I don't know, tune out for a second. The girl that's murdered, is it Billy? The high school girl that they mentioned being murdered?
I don't think they ever confirmed that.
There's no mention of that. And there was also mention at the beginning of the movie, oh, there was a girl who was, raped last week. And then Barb was kind of a bitch. He's like, oh, you can't rape a townie. It's like,
yeah, that was kind of funny.
That's a shit thing to say, dude.
Yeah, I wrote that one down. I love that quote, actually.
So I do think in my head, you fill those gaps in. Again, it's show not tell. They're not telling us that Billy did these things, but at the beginning of the movie, we see Billy enter the house, and these other things happened before he entered the house. So it's a very logical step. And part of me was like, is this all my research of serial killers where they do the same ritual over and over again because of something that happened to them? And so was Agnes that high school girl to Billy's mind? I don't know. I'm filling in gaps in the movie, but I was just curious. I like to assume everything that's mentioned was Billy.
There's apparently a novelization of this movie that came out in 1976. I've never heard anything about it or read anything about it, but it has more dialogue and it kind of fleshes out some of the characters, it says, and gives a little more, I guess, context to the property and backstory and stuff. So I don't know if anything would be in there or if Bob Clark ever endorsed anything like that. But
yeah, okay. I bet that is a pretty penny on eBay.
Probably.
I wonder if that's on Kindle. All right, so let's talk about the editing and special effects. I love the editing in this movie. Mm-hmm. And unlike the 2006 where we talked about the editing in that was quick and snappy, and we cut from a kill really quickly so that we couldn't linger on, the effects of it all. This movie lingers, and we sit there for a while on a lot of things. And I love that because it just slowly gets under your skin. And I love some of the slow, you guys mentioned some scenes go on a little long. I actually like the recital because it shows he mentions to Jess how important the recital is to him. And then we just see him sweating under the pressure of it through that scene. But the editing, the 5 that is this editing, is perfectly captured in Barb's murder. So I know we were going to talk about the carolers. I love the fact that Barb is being stabbed to death with a unicorn while carolers are singing "Come Let Us Adore Him" at the door. And we are cutting back and forth between Barb getting stabbed in it's the most violent scene in the film. And we see, as the last stab is happening and Barb is reaching her bloody hand out, Jess is clapping at the door. And that it was so good the way they cut that together with the carolers doing this happy song, this Christmas joyous thing that drives people crazy, but joyous Christmas thing happening while one of the most brutal murders in the film is also going on, cut with that. It's so good. I love that scene more every time I watch it. And honestly, watching it for this is when I caught that, as she's dying, Jess is smiling and clapping at the door. And there's something chilling about that because you realize Jess has no idea, obviously. And this is happening a floor above them as children stand at the door, Barb is being massacred. It's so good. We also get some of those shots of like the eyeball, which 2006 took that and ran with it and made it like the theme of the film. But we get a couple of shots of him like peeking through the door jambs or whatever. I love the editing on this film. I think it does. I would say, the first couple of watches, I did think there was a pacing issue. I did think it was kind of boring at the beginning. On repeated watches, I wouldn't take anything out, if I'm honest. I love all of it for different reasons and think it adds layers to the story.
Yeah, one of the things that you did not touch on, though, is that much like Texas Chainsaw Massacre or Psycho, you don't see actually a lot of what is going on.
Right.
We are not seeing skin ripping apart. We're not seeing organs. We're not seeing that kind of thing. When Ms. Mac dies, it's a point of view of the hook coming into her face, and all we see is her face and the camera swing, and then we see her legs go up into the attic, and that's about it. Everything else is done with sound design, and it's just trickery. Barb is on my screen dying right now. I'm not seeing much. There's blood, and it is the first like blow where you see Barb. That's more intense than with Miss Mac. But it has the same thing going on. You're not seeing a whole lot, but it's incredibly effective.
Yes.
And it's much scarier than the first one where I was throwing up because of skin Christmas cookies.
Right.
That is not.
I don't remember who said that quote, but it's what we imagine will always be worse than what we can see.
Exactly.
And yeah, this movie capitalizes on that.
But I think it does a good job because eventually we do start seeing some things. Like Barbara's murder is, it's not the most gory thing we've ever seen, but it's the most like direct and hands-on murder we see in the movie. But it kind of unwinds or maybe unwraps. Like the first murder is, I don't know, they get like progressively more and more disturbing and revealing.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't know, we're kind of like teased by it until the end. And then you see a throat cut and you see Barbara get killed and all that. And you start seeing Mrs. Mac hanging in the background. So it just starts revealing more and more to you as we get closer to the end. So I think that's pretty cool.
Okay. I really liked how they used shadows and silhouettes to show stuff where you don't really actually see Billy. I thought that was really good use of the sets and lighting. Although there's like, when it comes to editing though, that like one scene where John's like Lieutenant Fuller, John Saxon is like on the way to the sorority house. They're in a hurry. It's an emergency. Then you see the cars coming down the street in the town. It's like, I know it's winter and all, but like, dude, it's an emergency. You guys are going pretty slow for an emergency. And that scene was so drawn out just to get them all the way from down here all the way back to the river. Like, dude, you could like shorten that up, taking like 20 seconds off of that, maybe, whatever.
They forgot to speed that up in post.
Yeah, I guess so. Like, geez, man, it was kind of weak. But other than that, you don't really get much in the way of the special effects except with that bright red paint for the blood, and you see a throat slash. I was kind of hoping that when Miss Mac died, like when you see her feet coming up in the attic, there would have been maybe some blood drip from the hook in her face, maybe something to kind of give a little more presence. But I was kind of disappointed that there wasn't more with that. But it's okay. It still works really well. Mm-hmm. And man, they sure make a lot of use out of Claire's dead body. Throughout the whole thing, man. Like, you always see those scenes going back to her, especially that part where Billy's like, kind of, and he's rocking her back and forth. He's got her posed with the baby doll in her arm and stuff.
Creepy.
Like, super freaking creepy, dude. Oh my God.
Creepy.
But man, just how they kept panning back to her throughout everything, even at like the end of the movie. Like, there's that one scene where Mr. Harrison's going to take Miss Mac, to drop her off, where he's going to go look for his daughter. And you see where it's like zoomed, you see looking out the window, you see them get in the car, and then it pans back into the attic, and there's Claire again. And then at the very end, as it's back to that attic window, you see Claire, and it pans out to the house. Kind of really good use of space with that pan action. But then there was the scene where everyone's getting together for the search at the park, and I think they could have maybe tightened up that shot a bit. I think it was a little too far out, especially kind of how grainy it was looking. I think it would have been better if they just kind of brought that in a little more. But yeah.
what panning shot's amazing is when they first answer the phone call and it's like zooms in and like slow pans across every girl's face as they're listening to Billy, talk about their genitals and stuff.
Yep.
Oh God.
I also
Let me
think
lick it. Let me lick it.
Yeah. And
Like,
Barbara
damn, calm down.
Barbara
we don't
loves
need
it.
we don't need taken off of YouTube. Don't repeat the call.
Oh no, I'm not gonna go that far, dude. I'm not gonna go that far.
I think the sequence where they're tracking the phone too is edited really well and super tight and tense, and I love that scene.
I like that.
And you see the dude kind of like running between I don't know what he's actually doing. I don't know how you trace a phone call in the 70s. Well, I don't know how you do it now.
Well, he said it was a mechanical process, so he's checking the ticks where it, whatever registers. I don't know. It's weird.
Which I kind of find that fascinating as well as being a suspenseful scene. I'm watching him run through all these different phone lines, and I'm like, that's crazy.
And he tells him, like, you got to keep them in the line as long as you can because unfortunately it's a mechanical process. Like, that sounds shitty you have to deal with, but okay.
Man, you talked about the panning scenes. The one, which I'm going to talk about panning when we get to directing, but that's one of the things I love about this film is that one of watching her dad get in the car to go find her, but her dead body is like looking out the window at him. Is like, that's emotional. It's chilling. It's horrifying. It checks so many boxes in that one panning shot. And so does that final shot where we pan out from the window to see the house. And what do you hear as credits roll? What do you hear? The phone ringing. It's so good.
From inside the house.
All right, so before I go too hard on that, so I gave the editing a 5. I think you guys all gave your scores. Onto the script. I have no complaints about the script. I gave the script a 5. As we kind of said, to be able to pull off the depth of the storytelling, as well as the horror, we have humor with Mrs. Mack, who I just love. We have the Barb being brash and outspoken, sharp wit. We have Lieutenant Ken Fuller, who, unlike the 2019 we mentioned, every guy in 2019 sucks. Lieutenant Ken Fuller is out here trying to help. He's good male representation in the film. So it's not all men are bad. It's showing us these nice parallels. And then we have some good male characters. And I love John Saxon as Lieutenant Ken Fuller. Every time we watch it with my wife, I call him 1970s Zac Efron.
You have to explain that.
I'm going to flash up a picture of the two of them side by side. He looks like 1970s Zac Efron if he were.
He's on my screen right now. He does. Oh, that's weird.
Maybe like modern Zac Efron, like facial structure where he got the stuff done. He's got like a boxier face now.
Yeah, post surgery. But he's definitely like, put Zac Efron in as like 38, maybe 40 years old. In the 70s, you're picturing Lieutenant Ken Fuller right now. So, yeah, I forget where I was going with that. But, he's a good male character in the film. And then you have Phil, who is Phyllis, who is actually the house mom in the 2006 movie. Yep. But she's that kind-hearted girl. She's the only girl we actually see break down in tears with everything that's going on. She becomes overwhelmed in a scene and is just worried about her friends. And I love, you mentioned the shot of all of the girls' faces during that phone call. And if you look at Claire's face, she is petrified by that phone call. And you see it on her face. And there's just so much attention to detail throughout, from setting up Peter as our red herring to leaving this obscure nature to Billy, giving us just enough whatever was written in those phone calls is some of the most chilling content I've seen in film. And the way that opening one is intensely graphic and sexual in nature, but the final line of it, when Barb kind of stick your tongue in a light socket, that'll give you a charge. And then doesn't he wrap it up with, I'm going to kill you?
Yes.
And then click.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
It's goosebumps.
Incredible.
It's so good. So script is a 5 for me.
I mean, you can tell, like, Wes Craven had to be inspired by that opening phone call scene for Scream, right?
Oh,
I mean,
yeah.
everyone
What's your
thinks
favorite
That's what I
scene?
thought exactly when that happened.
Yeah.
They credited the movie When a Stranger Calls, but the When a Stranger Calls also does It's Coming from Inside the House. That one lifts it with the babysitter directly from the urban legend.
Mhm.
This came first, but obviously it's the same thing.
Yes.
So they credited When a Stranger Calls constantly during the promotion of the film, but When a Stranger Calls owes a lot to Black Christmas in that respect, and it's not. This is a better movie. So
I hate that movie so much.
Well,
Yeah, me too.
when a stranger calls, the only good part is like the beginning.
yes,
And
Well,
then
that was- When I was a little
I haven't
younger,
seen it, so I don't
I liked the remake a lot, like the 2005 or 6 remake, kind of. But
Yeah.
and I don't ever want to rewatch that, so it's probably not great. But I posted this on Instagram maybe a couple months ago. But I tried to rewatch, I watched the original for the first time, and I didn't like it.
it's been on my list. I haven't. I watched the remake when it came out because I was in high school. It was like at a party and everybody was freaked out because But I remember liking it then. But I don't know if I'll ever revisit that. I do want to see the original. But even I've heard the original is only good for like 30 minutes and then it's meh.
I would agree.
Script, I gave it a 4. I liked a lot of the dialogue that was in there, especially like kind of the shit with like Barb being kind of a smart ass at the police station, talking about like
Yes.
the new exchange number for Felicio.
Fellatio.
Oh my god! And Sergeant Nash is such a goober, man. Like, oh, that guy. I couldn't with that dude, but
Goober's a great word for it.
yeah, he's just like that hapless fool that works at the police station. But God, man, like one of the things though that I really like though is like how when Peter and Jess are talking about, and he's talking about how she's just treating it like having the wart removed, and then bringing
Yes.
that back later in the dialogue with Billy with the creepy phone calls. I thought was really great because that just makes it super creepy. She's like, how does he does? It makes her think that it is Peter, even though it really isn't.
Right.
I thought it was super sweet.
That's a perfect use of a red herring moment. It's so good because who said that? Peter. But then you think back, where did he say that? In the house where Billy could have heard it. And she doesn't know that there's somebody living in the attic. Like that's so good. I love that. I love that. Just that one little line said twice is so good. We wrapping up the script then.
Yeah, I gave it a. Sorry, I'm trying to read my handwriting and I can't, and I'm mad about
There's
it.
a lot of good one-liners in the film. There's a lot of that.
Yeah, it's incredibly clever, funny. I think it's really realistic. I mean, for 1974, and we brought up a little bit the Texas Chainsaw Massacre, which came out 2 months before this movie, so they're kind of they are in the same holiday season, sort of. Which the Texas Chainsaw Massacre is a whole different beast, but the dialogue and script of that movie is, in my opinion, so inferior to this in terms of just how
Yes.
I mean, this one's just seamless and natural, and it comes. The dialogue, I mean, it could be had with anybody. I don't know. It doesn't seem like very forced or anything, which I appreciate.
I think what you said back with the characters, how each of them have very unique personalities, I think that's executed so well because of the script. They each have very unique ways of talking and reacting to the situation that the script acknowledges, instead of writing from one, everybody's going to react the same way or have the same cadence and, inflection or however they're going to speak. Each of them has very different ways of speaking, from Margot Kidder, Barb being brash, that's displayed in the script. We're not told she's brash by her friends. It's clear. We see it. Or Phyllis, like I said, she's the only character we see break down and cry. She's worried about her friends. And Jess is the strong-willed, resourceful one. And that's displayed so well through the dialogue, through the script. It's just so tight and fine-tuned. I love it. Let's talk about the acting then.
Yeah.
Okay, John, you go first.
Dude, so compared to the other two films, everything felt more natural. Like how you would imagine like actual sorority life being, especially for the times, and how women were becoming more free and more loose with themselves, and like and how they do, but what you would normally see behind the scenes, what you would think typically would be they're being more like you would see the guys are being in a sorority house with drinking, the swearing, crazy posters, and all this stuff, and like they all just had a good mesh, even with their own distinct personalities and everything. They just was such a natural kind of interaction. It felt like they had throughout the film. I really liked Miss Mac. It was like you were saying earlier, Tim. She's kind of the comedy of the whole thing. She's like the queen of vaudeville, as it were. Just her being like the whole house mom, but goofy, but then like, oh God, I got to put up with these bitches kind of thing. Like when she's kind of turned away from them kind of deal. And then like always trying to like search out those hidden bottles of booze. Like she's in that one room, she's going through the books in the bookcase. She's like, oh, B for booze, hidden bottle. She's in the bathroom brushing her teeth. Out of the water tank of the toilet. Another bottle of booze, a little mouth rinse with it, digging in the closet. And it's empty bottle, son of a bitch, She was a lot of fun. She's a good character, even like interacting with Mr. Harrison when they're looking for Claire, and she's like trying to hide the peace poster with the two naked people on it from him, They're such good girls. She just goes like, and every time she kind of slips up and doesn't know he's there, she's like, oh, you're doing such a good thing by helping me and taking me somewhere. You're doing so good, like.
I wrote that scene down because I'm just dying that whole time as she like, and we slow pan over that poster of the old lady and it ends with her like.
He's just looking like, what the hell is this? So she was like my favorite character when it came to acting. Barb, Margot Kitterman, like she was definitely the kind of the butthole one, but she seemed like she was like really like the attention-seeking person in the group. That really kind of stood out. That attention-seeking with how she like was treating the guy, the officer Nash Sergeant Nash at the police station, and how she like acted with the kids. Her and Shitty Santa, as I like to call him. Sitting there swearing in front of the kids and everything, just being total jackasses. It's like, oh man, what the hell is going on here?
It's so funny.
There's so many good little moments like that where you're like, dude, this is like, that's like the funnest, the funnest part of the whole film in terms of it, just, comedy. But Phyllis, and Jess and everything, and like interacting with even with the townies when the guys come to the door, you get a sense of like, yeah, those dudes are some straight up goofy townies, and they're like, ooh, college girls, they were in that role so well, even if they were like minor bit parts. And Peter, definitely, I think I liked his acting a lot too, because he definitely came along as like that stressed creeper, especially after the whole incident, like him trying to like talk to Jess at the house. He's like, oh, I was waiting out, it's getting cold outside, so I was sleeping upstairs, whatever. And then he's just still getting all kind of like delusional about what he thinks he's going to do, that he's going to take charge of the situation. Here's what's going to happen. And she's just like, hell no, I'm going to do my thing still. Like, this is not going to happen. Like the way they interacted with those scenes, I thought was really good. So I gave it a 4.
I love his little break when he just destroys the piano at the concert hall.
Yeah,
just that little scene. Something about that. But yeah, you mentioned there's a ton of good lines that I could have talked about during script. I don't know why I didn't. This movie's filled with like, if you're not paying attention, you're gonna miss it. But my favorite line from Mrs. Mack was when she's wearing that nightgown the girls gave her, and she looks in the mirror. I think it's after taking a swig of the whiskey from the toilet.
Jesus, I wouldn't wear this to have my liver.
Yeah,
so funny. She is so funny, and
Barb had a lot of the one-liners though. She had the most one-liners throughout the whole thing.
Yeah, speaking of professional virgins, here we have the queen of vaudeville. Yep, she's great. Yeah, Margot Kidder kills it as the drunk sorority sister in this film. She is so good that I almost did not recognize her as Lois Lane. Like, she's so drastically different from Superman just a couple years later. But also, I do think she struggled with alcoholism most of her life. So
Yeah.
I was gonna say it's probably one of the most accurate depictions of like an actor, like a drunk person on screen, and you can tell that she probably has a lot of experience being drunk.
Yeah, or she might have been. It's one of.
There was some potential for that.
But she's so good. Jess, who is played by Olivia Hussey, who is in the Romeo and Juliet.
That's where I knew her from originally. That's the first thing I saw her in.
Yeah. She's fantastic in this film. And I think it goes with the character arc. She grows. But the scene, if I were to pick one scene in this film that depicted 5 out of 5 acting, it is the scene that I put at the opening of the episode when she gets the phone call that the call is coming from inside the house. And what we didn't see in the intro to this episode, because it was like 2 minutes if I didn't cut everything, is after she drops the phone and walks away from the police officer, she's so fixated on saving her friends but following what the officer says that she stands at the door and screams her friend's name.
Phil! Bob! Oh, please answer me! Phil! Bob! Please answer me! Please answer me! Please! Oh.
Chills every time. It's so good. I am truly convinced that this girl is terrified every time I watch it. It's not Scream Queen. It's a true performance of pure terror, and it is so good. It's 5 out of 5 on acting. I mean, we get the levels from her throughout the film, but everybody else delivers, from Phil being the kind-hearted one and so on. I have zero complaints in the acting department.
Yeah, I think the best scene, the best display of acting also involves Jess. I think it's when her and Peter are talking at the house and they're having that kind of heart-to-heart, and she talks about like wanting to fulfill her dreams and everything like that. And I think there might be like a fire going on or something in the background. But I think it's a really good sequence between the two. And I also think, I don't know the guy who plays Peter's name off the top of my head, but I think he was really good. And
Keir Dullea.
I wouldn't have known how to say it even if I looked it up.
I probably said it wrong.
Shitty helmet haircut, though. Oh my god.
They all looked this. All the men had the same hair except Claire's dad. But he reminds me. I guess this is maybe character, but Peter reminds me a lot of Billy Loomis. Actually, thinking of Scream 1, just in terms of being kind of, I guess, the main guys or the main girl's boyfriend. But I don't know.
And
he just always
shady.
Yeah, and just always you think he might be the killer, but then he kind of gaslights the girl into convincing her that, you know, he's actually good for her, but just Billy's actually the killer. But I don't know.
Peter reminds me of guys my friends have dated. So like, he nails that. Like you see your friend with that guy and then you pull her aside and you're like, are you sure you're okay? Are you sure this is a good idea? I don't step in on my friends, but if I've seen this guy before, and those are the only times I ever say something without being asked, and he nails it. He made my skin crawl just as much as Billy did in some of those scenes. The way that he talks to her, like there's nothing wrong with his opinion, but the way that he delivers it, oh, that's terrifying, and it makes you understand why Jess is making the decision she is making.
I'm gonna make you regret it.
Yeah. He's threatening her. He's being violent. Even if nobody else is in the room, it's not normal to beat up a piano. Like the dude is unhinged, and it's great.
Yeah.
And that actor is great in that role. And then Barb, in a similar way, reminds me of friends that I have who have problems with their mom. Maybe not necessarily the drinking, but I got the impression early on when she made the comment about her mom, like I can easily see, like I've seen this situation before where the mom pisses the girl off and she's like, I don't understand why, like in your head, you're like, why does my mom fucking hate me? And then it becomes, they spiral out. Like I've seen this happen to friends of mine. So I don't think that Barb is just drunk and she's acting out, and I think it's because of her mother, and something has happened off screen with her mom.
Well, she
Yeah.
calls her mom a real gold-plated whore.
Yeah.
Which I don't know what that, I don't know, but
Another 5-star line.
well,
Yeah.
another
Mom's
thing
a gold
about
digger.
another thing about Barb though is she blames herself for Claire's death the whole movie. Like she opens up to that at the end when she breaks down because of that scene where Claire's really scared during the phone call, and Barb, internalizes what she said to Billy and blames herself, which I think is a whole other, piece to the heavy drinking.
Well, and they don't even know that she's dead at that point.
Well, towards the beginning of the film, of one of the first calls, Phyllis, or what was it, Claire or Phyllis was like, "Hey, you shouldn't antagonize him like that. Whoever's on the phone, It's like, oh shit." So she probably feels the weight of that, after her being told that, and then disappearing. Like, oh shit, what have I done?
God, this movie's so good.
Then John Saxon was put on Earth to play police lieutenants.
Dude, I was about to say he's been so typecast as a police officer, a government agent, a military guy. Like that's one of his main, or a cowboy. Those have been some of his like the typical roles that he would play. Man, but I love John Saxon though. I think he's still a pretty awesome dude. But like Peter though, man, that guy, like that delusional break, especially like when she's hiding in the basement and Peter's like trying to look in the window. Is that her? Is that her? Ooh, talk to me. And then breaks in and like, oh, what are you doing hiding back here? Oh, now I'm dead.
Well, also the editing of that is perfect because we talked about in sound design, we go from Billy on the inside of the house pounding on the basement door, unable to get in, and then just gets a second to breathe. And then Peter's outside on the door, like, oh, Jess, is that you? Why would he, like, red herring, editing, everything perfect as to why would he look in the basement for her? Another misdirection. It's so good. So good. All right. So on to this is the direction.
Get it, Tim. Get it.
So good. This is where I'm gonna be incoherent because I didn't organize my thoughts on how good this direction is.
Don't pull a me. Come on, don't pull a me.
I mean, I mentioned all of the stuff in the editing. Nothing cuts quickly in this film, and I love that. Like we have a scene that is so effective and so chilling of Billy rocking Claire's dead body holding a doll while Billy sings. And instead of being something crazy dramatic, like I mentioned in 2006, it's not shot like from the rafters. It's not shot from her feet. It is from Billy's perspective, just looking straight at her as he sings a song that is disturbing. If you didn't,
rhyme.
Yeah, if you didn't catch it at the beginning, he's singing. It's in our little intro for this. The quote I pulled because it just got under my skin. He's singing "Little baby bunting, Daddy's gone a hunting, gone to fetch a rabbit skin to wrap his baby Agnes in," and he's singing that as we just see her rock back and forth. But I mentioned the panning shot from Claire's dead body in the attic, watching her dad leave to go find her, and the multiple layers that single scene conveys in the way it's set up. Or the ending. Okay, so let's talk about the ending, the epilogue. Jess kills Peter. That's what we see on screen. We assume he's dead. And then she goes into like a catatonic state and is in bed. And there are a couple short cuts in this, but then for the most part, we cut right back to the same shot. But the entire epilogue is nearly a continuous take. Like I said, there's a couple little second 2 or 3 in there, but we're just in bed and we just slowly pan out as this conversation's happening. And then we're standing in the hallway and we're watching people come in and out of the room. We're watching people have this conversation. And again, it's that voyeuristic feel that this movie has done from the beginning. But this is not Billy's perspective. This is you. I feel like it's me standing there watching this happening. There are people walking in front of me. And this conversation's happening. And then Claire's dad has a panic attack and gets taken to the hospital. And everybody's like, oh, Jess is fine. Let's go. And they
I hated that. I hated that they just, why wouldn't you take her to the hospital? She's catatonic.
Yeah. But they leave her in bed. I'm gonna ignore this details of that.
Anyway.
They leave her in bed and then it slow pans. And where does it go first? Down the hallway.
Barb's room.
So it's a slow pan to Barb's room where we see blood on the mattress. Sheets have been stripped. Everything's gone. So we see the horror of the movie right there in that shot. And we just sit there for a second. Soak it in. Take that in. Live with it. All right. And then the camera, no cutting. Camera's just going to pan down the hallway again. And we look at Claire's room. And we see the opposite. We see the hope that this movie had, these girls had. We see Claire's packed bags to go home. And that just tugs at your heartstrings. So we have the horror in Barb's room down to the hope and optimism in Claire's room, the packed bags sitting on her bed. And then we pan down the hallway further and up into the attic where we see Mrs. Mack hanging from something. We see Claire's dead body with the plastic, with the shower. It looks like a shower curtain, but I think it's like a dress bag or something like that.
Like a dry cleaning bag.
Yeah, wrapped around her face. And we hear Billy singing. And there's a couple small cuts in that. But we see that, and then it pans out to where we see the whole house, a single police officer standing outside of it, and then the phone begins to ring again. And it's just so good. That whole final sequence is up there with some of my favorite things in all of horror. That final sequence is up there with something Hitchcock would have done. It's so good. I love it. And I think there's just so many layers and details that we've already discussed throughout this film about, showing Claire being petrified during that phone call to Margot having that effect. That's the director bringing all of this together in a stroke of genius. And what is like the other shocking thing? What is Bob Clark known for? Yeah, I mean,
A Christmas
Story.
Yeah.
Like that's probably his biggest film. And then the horror community knows Bob Clark made one of the greatest horror films to ever exist. So the direction's a 5 out of 5 for me.
I also gave it a 5 out of 5. I would like to point out that the entire time you were talking, it was playing. I'm at the end of the movie. So the whole time you were talking, in case anybody would like an example of how long this scene plays, that's how long it was. It started right when you started talking and just ended.
Nice.
So, they really do. Even on Jess, seeing her lay in the bed, she's on camera for a full minute, just laying there. You're just waiting for something to happen.
It's in no rush to get anywhere, and I love it.
And it doesn't need to be, because it's just like you're waiting, and then you're like, oh God, I'm going to be waiting forever. I don't know. But this one, more than the others, it felt like the person who made it cared for it. They cared about what they were making. They wanted to make something good. You don't see people directing movies like this right now. I don't know if it, I'm not going to say any more, but because it can always be done again. But right now, I don't think we don't see movies like this. This is not just a horror movie. This is a film. Like this goes into, like, it crosses the barrier. And when we start playing around with the term elevated horror, which I think is dumb because horror has always been elevated, movies that do that don't really do this. They use other tricks, but we're not seeing this kind of thing where it's just sort of, it's slow and it's scary. I think a lot of movies that do slow burn nowadays just go slow, or they go slow for 85 minutes and then hit you in the last 5 minutes. And I don't want to watch that. I want to watch something like this. 5 out of 5.
I gave it a 4 out of 5, but I think this was me trying to find a place for my pacing stuff, and I didn't know if I was going to put it in, I don't know where I was going to put it. So I think my thought was to kind of ding the direction for some of the pacing issues. But I mean, I think the movie has amazing cinematography. I think so much of the creative energy and ideas and stuff are there and amazing and groundbreaking for the time. And I don't know. I mean, it probably, I think with this one, I was just trying not to give it all 5. So I tried to pick a few categories where I could take from it.
Okay. I don't really have much to say on direction. I mean, you guys have pretty much said all, especially Tim. But I put it at a 3, but after everything that's been said, I feel like changing it to a 4. I feel like it's appropriate. That's all I really got to say on it. I don't think I've said anything that would be, involved with direction and other stuff that I've already talked about.
Yeah, Jonathan, I got you bumped up to a 4 there. Always happy to give this movie a couple more points. So the it factor, this was actually where I was most critical of the film, was the it factor. Because as far as I know, it wasn't a big deal when it released. But the cult following is insane. As we are here today talking about a movie that is celebrating its 50th anniversary. And from 1974, we're talking about this film and how it changed the genre. I'm going to change my score right now because I don't know if I remember this correctly. I'm trying to find the trivia real quick. But basically, from what I have understood, Halloween would not have existed if it wasn't for this film.
Really?
Are you talking about the story where it was going to be a sequel to Black Christmas?
Well, I don't know.
That, and I don't know if that's true, but I can tell you just from a perspective of time and watching these movies like grow over the years, Halloween does not exist without this movie.
Yeah,
like
so
in the
I
way
think
that it is.
I think that's what I mean. Not as so much. I know people say that like Halloween is the spiritual sequel or so on to this film. I don't see that so much, but I don't think Halloween as it is would have happened without this film. Just the entire backbone, I don't know how to convey it exactly, but like we said, Psycho and Peeping Tom were kind of an introduction to the killer POV. But this paved the way for slashers as far as, hey, killer is in a house and he's going to eliminate everyone in the house. Halloween took that a little different direction, not trapped in a house, so on, but it grew from there. And I think this is the foundation to what became the slasher craze, really starting about 8 years later and going nuts for most of the 80s until Jason Took Manhattan and then we were done with it.
Rightfully so, too. It deserved to end after that movie.
That was it. This movie is foundational.
So I'm not going to claim to know a lot about the history of horror films and who did what first, and all that stuff. I've seen a lot of stuff, but I don't really know much historically. So when it comes to like it factor and cultural significance, I think about how, the film was made, it's 1974. You're coming off of, Woodstock, Summer Love, Free Love. And, now we're getting to this point where, feminism is becoming more of a well-known concept to a lot of people across the country. And so you're seeing these girls who are living more freely. And that's a big thing for women of that time, because the rise of feminism and and self-control of your own body, and the idea of abortion, becoming more prevalent in that time, even as big as an issue as it is still now. And then also the idea of safety for women across the country, because being in 1974, starting in the 70s, you had people like Ted Bundy, these serial killers, and then it was like 2-3 years after this movie came out, you had David Berkowitz, the son of Sam. There were so many of these women serial killers that are coming up. So it kind of brings to focus the idea of safety for women, especially young women in college, these young adults. So I think that's kind of important, versus the whole impact in the horror genre. So I give it a 4.
I love the way you look at that. Like, you truly take. So when I'm thinking of scoring and I'm looking at the cultural significance, I look at the cultural significance as like, is it on TikTok? You look at it as like, like, that's literally like, are people on Instagram talking about it? That's what I look at. You are literally looking at it as like, the world at the time it was made, did it reflect society? Did it impact it? I love the way you look at it. You always have good perspective when it comes to the it factor. So I appreciate that.
I try.
That's why I love my scoring system. There are detractors, but I love it. All right. So let's talk about how entertained we are. Should we all just say it at the same
5
time?
out of 5.
Because
10 out of 10. Does it go to 10?
10.
I already said I have the most.
9.
Yeah, I gave it a 9 as well.
All right. This movie.
I'd definitely be down to show this to people and be like, yeah, do you need to watch this film?
I've showed this movie to so many of my friends and past lovers and whatever you want to call it. I show this movie to everybody.
You may watch the movie.
Yeah. Which is probably why they're of the past, is because it usually ends at Black Christmas. But
it's like, why are you making me watch this? I'm out of here.
If they are in the past because of Black Christmas, they deserve to be in the past. Just saying.
This was my one night stand move, though. I'd bring them home and show them Black Christmas, and it would just not work out.
So
that's how you get them to leave. Put that on in the morning.
Yeah. Oh man. If I had made my wife watch this while we were dating, I don't know how that would have went. I made her watch Lord of the Rings instead. So, so the overall, our final scores. Let's jump into final scores, final thoughts. Wrap up your conclusion to the movie and whatever you would like to say about it. Because of the scores, I kind of want Ivy to go first. I'm putting you on the spot.
I don't remember what I said my total was. Whatever the highest you can get is my total. I love this movie. I'm highly entertained. And as good as I've actually watched this twice. I watched this not for the podcast purposes right after I watched 2019. And sitting through 2019 is worth it if I get to watch this.
Okay.
If that makes sense. Yeah.
I don't know if you could say that.
That's an interesting thought. If I had to watch the 2019 one every time I wanted to watch this movie, I think I would probably do it too, though. So I think it says a lot about the movie.
Yeah, maybe. Now I'm starting to question if I like it that much.
But no, I think that if I have to watch 2019, this is a treat afterwards, not 2019 is a punishment that goes along with this.
That's fair. Yeah.
So let's see. Something I probably should have mentioned also is maybe it's part of the it factor. Maybe I don't know, but I feel like this is maybe like one of the foundations for one of the horror film tropes of the main character doing the stupid thing instead of the smart thing. Like Sergeant Nash tells her to go out of the house, but she decides to freak out, make a lot of noise, and then go upstairs to a place where there's no space to really run from. I'm just like, what the hell? So I feel like this is kind of like laying the foundation for seeing that in a lot of other films. What was that?
She at least grabbed the fireplace poker before she
at least, but still, like, oh man, why would you do
I think
that?
this movie gets away with it because they did it so early. I want to say 2019, somebody says, "I'll be right back." And it's treated like that's a normal thing for people to say in horror movies after Scream came out.
Right.
It's not done with any hint of irony. It's not a joke. It's not immediately scary right afterwards. It's just, I'll be right back. Like, I can forgive this one because this is where it came from.
I think that scene.
That's dumb.
I think that scene too says something for John Saxon, like the intelligence of his character as the lieutenant. Is he's like, just please don't tell her that the call is coming from inside the house. Like, let us handle this. Like, we'll get there. And then, of course, he's a goober in ashes and ruins everything. But
I wanted to see John Saxon like pistol whip him for screwing up in the exact way he told him not to. He told him not to screw this up. And what did he do? Sergeant Ash, of course, he doesn't get anything. Oh, so pissed at that guy.
I love it because it is the first scene that actually gives me, like, every time I watch it, straight goosebumps at that scene when the calls are coming from inside the house and her screams later. Every time. I cannot watch it. And there are few movies left in this world that I've seen this many times that still have a physical reaction to them. And that is just the culmination of everything that this movie is. For me, total 47 out of 50. It's probably one of the highest scores I've ever given a movie. It's up there. But to me, as far as horror goes, this is one of my favorite horror films. It's not, I've said it on this episode and I've said it before, Psycho is like my favorite movie of all time. This is not Psycho, but it is damn close. Like, it is real close to being that good.
Hell yeah. Oh, I got a little sidetracked. I forgot my score. After my adjustments for my little changes there, after getting some enlightened perspective from the rest of you, I'm at a 38.
And then we just need yours.
And I feel kind of bad for Phil, Andrea Martin, who came back as the Miss Mac for the 2006.
Yeah.
I felt bad because after they talked, like her and Jess talked to the townies, those little goofy guys, she's like, oh, I'd rather face the killer. I'd rather face Billy. And boom,
She
got
did.
your wish. Ha, sucker.
A little bit of foreshadowing that's just so good.
Man.
Yeah, I think this movie's awesome. My name on Instagram is Black Christmas, kind of because my name is Chris and I thought it was clever, but also because I love this movie so much. I think it's probably the best slasher, in my opinion. I don't know if it's my favorite slasher, but I think it's the best. One of the best, at least. And I think its influence on Halloween, which, not to detract from what Black Christmas is, just to like lift up Halloween. But like, I love Halloween. I'm wearing my Halloween 3 shirt.
Nice.
Which isn't related at all to this or Halloween 1, but it's my favorite Halloween movie. So my opinion probably doesn't matter because
that is wear it with pride. Wear it with pride. It
glows in the dark too. Like, I'm gonna turn this light off and see if it. Oh, you can't.
There you go. Nice.
I don't think it worked, but it's supposed to glow in the dark. Anyways, I don't know. This movie's awesome. I love Christmas horror movies too. I think this is, I don't know. I keep saying things that I think are true, but they clearly aren't. But I think this is probably one of the first Christmas horror movies that, I don't know. Do you guys know any before this?
No,
I don't. Like I said, I don't know much about horror movie history.
Was it Santa Claus versus the Martians, maybe, but it was really scary. No.
It's I don't know. I love it. So I think it's great. Right. I'm glad that we were here and we're able to talk about all 3 of them.
Yeah. And I think seeing all 3 of them in such a short amount of time, really, it gave me perspective on things that I liked about, I would say each of them, but I'm pretty firm behind my 0 entertainment value on 2019. So I can't really say there's much I liked about that film, but I do see the different things where this was pre-slasher craze. and there are things I love about it. I love the film. And then to see what 2006 did, kind of embracing the slasher craze and just going nuts with it, and seeing how that paid off and how it didn't, and how some things, like I said on the 2006, that 2006 was the trashy twin sister. And I stand by that. That's not a bad thing. That movie is a tremendous amount of fun. This movie is this movie is art. This movie is art for me. This movie is beautiful, and it's not like most good art. It's not going to be widely accepted. Most people, may not understand it, so on. But this movie transcends the genre, I think. And it does it masterfully. I mean, how many horror movies did Bob Clark make? Exactly. So, as far as I know, this was his...
None that I know of this.
Yeah, as far as I know, this was his only... I mean, he made A Christmas Story, Porky's, Baby Genius. Like, he was like, hey, I'm going to make a single horror movie, and it's going to be fantastic. And he did it. But, yeah. Should I wrap this up?
Yeah, he was able to avoid...
Okay. Go ahead.
Bob Clark was able to avoid the whole TV show thing. I think he directed a few episodes of Dukes of Hazzard, but that isn't what his career became. So
yeah,
how did he make movies like this and A Christmas Story and even Porky's, because that has its place, and then end up making Blonde and Blonder, some sort of weird off-label comedy starring Denise Richards and Pamela Anderson? That's sad. Yeah. That's even sadder than Super Baby's Baby Geniuses 2.
Yeah. Like,
what happened there?
What?
His trajectory.
That's crazy.
His trajectory is... Okay, so I guess this was his third semi-horror movie. So he made Children Shouldn't Play With Dead...
At some point, you just need to make money.
Yeah, that's true. He did Children Shouldn't Play With Dead Things, which was comedy horror. And then he did... Dead of Night, which is that horror? No, but
it says horror thriller.
Yeah, so he kind of did, but this was the first like full tilt horror that he did, and man, like I wish more people would take a lesson from directors like these. Are just the guys I love. M. Night Shyamalan. He's hit or miss, but the one thing he does that these guys do is uses the camera to tell the story. Please. That's why we're here. Without good camera work, a movie sucks. And I mean, compare the camera work in 2019 to the camera work in this film. It's art. Like, this film is art. I've said it before. All right. I'll let you guys, any last things before I read us out of here?
Fun fact, Olivia, she was in a film in 1987 with famous actor, comedian Steve Martin. When they met, he's like, oh my God, you were in one of my favorite all-time films. And she thought he was talking about the 1968 version of Romeo and Juliet, but it was actually Black Christmas. He claimed he'd seen it around 27 times. So apparently Steve Martin loves this movie. So I'd say that's an awesome endorsement right there in itself.
As if I didn't have enough reasons to love Steve Martin.
I was just going to say.
Like him rocking the banjo wasn't enough. Like, yeah, this really solidifies it.
Yeah.
I mean, I watch Planes, Trains, and Automobiles every Thanksgiving. So.
Really?
Is that the right movie?
That's awesome.
Did I quote the right movie?
Yeah. No, that's the right movie.
Everyone was quiet. I was hesitant. No, I love that film.
So I've never thought of like Thanksgiving movies and that, you know.
It is a Thanksgiving. You were correct. Sorry, I blinked out for a second, but yes, it is a Thanksgiving movie.
I love that. I love that film. I love just the small fact that film is rated R for a single scene and line of dialogue where Steve says the F word like 8 times to the person working the airplane ticket, whatever. I love that film. John Candy. Anyways, I digress.
God bless you, man. We miss you, guy.
Yep. Black Christmas is a timeless tale of suspense and terror that continues to send shivers down the spines of audiences, showcasing the masterful craftsmanship of director Bob Clark and a stellar cast. That's a wrap on episode 13 of 13 Nights of Halloween. Thank you, Chris. Thank you, Ivy, for joining us for the Black Christmas episodes and for this season.
Thank you for having us.
Yeah, sorry, I was gonna say something too, but I couldn't find the unmute. But thank you. It was fun.
Yeah. This is our season 2 finale. We hope you enjoyed diving into the world of horror at the end of the season with us, exploring some iconic spooky films. If you've been with us throughout the year, Jonathan and I have gone to the depths of Tubi
Dived into
to bring you some unique films that you might not have heard of. As we bid farewell to this season, we'll be taking a break until January of next year. But fear not, we'll be back with brand new episodes, fresh scares, and plenty of thrills to keep you entertained. In the meantime, be sure to catch up on any episodes you might have missed and stay tuned for updates on our upcoming season. From all of us here at The Average, we wish you a spooktacular Halloween and a thrilling holiday season.